He harvested the organs of his girlfriends to sell to reputable men for money. Always be involved in your daughter's life because the world out here is dangerous. Watch from this interesting story how ladies should be careful of wanting to marry rich men. In the small village of Ukolu, where the soil was dry, the trees gnawed, and the laughter of children echoed in the early mornings, there lived a young man named Kem. Kem was in his mid-20s, with a tall, lanky frame and a face that looked older than his years, molded by hardships that had started from a young age. He was the kind of person who went unnoticed, sometimes even forgotten, except when he was the subject of mockery. Kem was known around the village as a failure, a laughingstock. His family had once been prosperous, but a series of unfortunate events, including his father's early death and a failed crop season, left them destitute. Now, Kem had little to his name. He survived by doing odd jobs for the villagers, clearing bush paths, tending goats, or working the fields. Yet, despite his best efforts, the money was never enough. The village youth, seeing his tattered clothes and empty bowl at every community gathering, taunted him mercilessly. "Kem, have you eaten today?" they would ask, laughing as he turned away, his face a mixture of humiliation and anger. Kem's pride lay in shreds, trampled daily underfoot by the jeers and mocking eyes of the villagers. As the days grew darker, so did his thoughts. He began to seethe with resentment, dreaming of a life where he could return the mocking laughter with one of his own, cold and rich. The idea of wealth gnawed at him, inflating within him like a balloon that would soon burst. Then one evening, while nursing his bruised pride under a star-strewn sky, Kem overheard two men talking. They were strangers to the village, men who spoke in hushed tones about harvesting and selling. Kem's curiosity was piqued, and he leaned in closer. The strangers' words revealed a dark world, a world in which human organs were traded like cattle at the market. They talked about money, more than Kem had ever dreamed of, and about clients with deep pockets, politicians, businessmen, and ritualists willing to pay handsomely for fresh goods. It was the kind of money that could buy power, respect, and silence. The days after the overheard conversation were plagued with thoughts of betrayal, fear, and desire. Kem wrestled with the concept, finding himself increasingly enticed by the path it offered. The scorn and mockery of his village became the fuel that pushed him closer to the unthinkable. Eventually, Kem made a fateful decision. He would reinvent himself as a hunter, a harvester of organs. With cunning and deception, he would lure young women into his trap. He would be rich, respected, and, most importantly, feared. Kem's plan was simple. He would present himself as a gentleman, transforming from the village's butt of jokes into an alluring figure. He put on a confident facade, washed his clothes, and found a charm within himself that he hadn't known existed. He began to court women in the village, all the while concealing his grim intentions behind a smile and a kind word. His first victim was Ebo, a bright-eyed girl with dreams of moving to the city. She was young, innocent, and trusting, a perfect target. Kem invited her to a secluded spot near the riverbank, promising her an exciting future. When she arrived, he talked about city life and the possibilities that awaited them. Then, he struck, ruthlessly taking her life, and harvesting her organs with the tools he'd procured from a black market trader. That night, Kem delivered the organs to a contact, a shifty-eyed man who handed him a wad of cash in return. The money was more than Kem had seen in his entire life. In his mind, he justified his actions by focusing on his poverty and the derision he had endured. He thought about his hunger and loneliness, and the cash made him feel vindicated. For the first time, he held power. The sudden influx of money in Kem's life did not go unnoticed. Within weeks, he began dressing in the finest clothes he could find in the market. His shack of a home received a makeover, and he started carrying himself with a confidence that the villagers had never seen before. Suddenly, the man who had been the laughingstock of Ukolu became someone the villagers envied. He threw small parties, inviting some of the very people who had once mocked him. Or, Kem has done well for himself, the village elders would say, their eyes gleaming with respect, and perhaps a hint of suspicion. But as Nkem's wealth grew, so did the whispers. Young women in the village were disappearing at an alarming rate, their absence casting a shadow over Ukolu. Mothers warned their daughters, fathers stayed vigilant, and the village chief held meetings to discuss the disturbing trend. Despite the tension in the air, Nkem continued his path, his greed for wealth overpowering any lingering remorse. He perfected his techniques, becoming more adept at manipulating his victims. Each disappearance filled his pockets further and elevated his status in the community. The village's unease grew, with worried mothers lighting candles and praying at night for the safe return of their daughters. The once lively marketplace buzzed with conversations about witchcraft, curses, and other superstitions. Meanwhile, Nkem's rise from a life of misery was the most talked about story in the village. Some marveled at his transformation, while others grew suspicious of his sudden fortune. A group of villagers, led by Adeobi, the sister of one of the missing girls, decided to investigate. Adeobi had noticed that Nkem's interest in the young women coincided too closely with the dates of their disappearances. She spoke to some of the other girls who had been courted by him, and they revealed unsettling accounts of Nkem's behavior. The final straw came when Adeobi's friend, Chinya, vanished without a trace. This time, the villagers were more vigilant. They launched a full search, combing through the village and surrounding forest. They interviewed everyone who had last seen her, and all signs pointed to Nkem. Yet, with his newfound wealth and charm, he managed to deflect suspicion, feigning innocence and concern. But Adeobi wouldn't be deterred. She was determined to get justice for her sister and friends. Late one night, she followed Nkem, shadowing him through the village until he disappeared into a hidden path. Adeobi followed cautiously, keeping her distance, until she saw him meet with a mysterious man. Her heart raced as she watched him hand over a package in exchange for a thick envelope of cash. The next day, Adeobi informed the village chief of what she had seen. The chief, along with several young men and a few elders, confronted Nkem, demanding an explanation. Nkem tried to deny everything, but his confidence wavered under the scrutiny. Soon, one of the villagers discovered his tools, the knives, the bottles, and the ropes he had hidden. The evidence was undeniable. Nkem's twisted secrets were laid bare for the entire village to see. The villagers erupted in fury, their rage fueled by the loss of their daughters and the betrayal by one of their own. Nkem was apprehended and handed over to the authorities. The once-daring villagers now looked upon him with horror and disgust, and his name was cursed by every family that had lost a daughter. As Nkem was led away, his eyes met Adeobi's. In her gaze, he saw a depth of grief that pierced him, stripping away any illusions he had once held about his actions. The wealth, the power, and the respect he had amassed dissolved into dust, leaving behind only a hollow man bound by his sins. In the end, Nkem was sentenced to life in prison. In his cell, stripped of wealth, freedom, and pride, he had nothing but time to contemplate the path he had chosen. His rise and fall became a cautionary tale for generations in Ukolu, a reminder of how greed and resentment could twist a soul beyond redemption. And in the village of Ukolu, the mothers continued to pray, not just for their lost daughters but for the strength to resist the darkness that had once claimed one of their own.